Welcome everyone, my name is Reed Blakemore, Acting Director of the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center. We're here at New York Climate Week with Jakob Stausholm, CEO of Rio Tinto. Jakob, first off, thank you so much for joining us today. You're joining us as part of the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center CEO series, where we highlight the leading CEOs of the energy transition. And of course, this is where that conversation is happening this week. New York Climate Week, a lot of critical action needed to meet our clean energy deployment goals. Rio Tinto plays a huge part in that, given the unprecedented amount of minerals and metals that will be needed to bring those technologies to market. How is Rio Tinto adapting and preparing for such profound change in the energy system, while also leading on climate action through the production of these minerals and metals?
Yeah, thank you. It's a massive journey for all of us, probably the biggest challenge facing mankind, and particularly industrial companies. We are kind of like the first in the chain, so we kind of supply the manufacturing industry and ultimately the final consumer goods, etc. We have a very important role to play. Last year, we laid out and just asked ourselves, what are we really in for? And we set ourselves 4 objectives for the company. And one of them was that we must have impeccable ESG credentials. And in a way you can say it's a bit fluffy, but it's actually very helpful, because impeccable ESG credential means you have to do as much as you can. And we set ourselves some really tough targets in the autumn last year, that we're going to reduce our CO2 emission by 15% in 25 and by 50% in 2030. And given that we are a very big physical company, it's a massive change. And we also announced that we're going to invest $7.5 billion to make that happen direct. There will also be a lot of indirect investments. It's a massive rejuvenation of industrial assets that are going on. So it's wonderful to be here in New York this week. This morning I met with a number of representatives from the biggest companies in the US, because the reality is we don't have all the answers. We need to work together. We need to listen to each other. I've also met with civil society. It's absolutely crucial to get everything in. This is complex, and we shouldn't waste too much resources. And above everything, we shouldn't waste too much time. We want to go at speed, but we don't want to do stupid things here. So it's a learning week.
Of course, the big learning week for all of us, and I think that's part of the value of being here in New York at this time. So many people are here. The conversation is so exciting, and I think in particular you mentioned something incredibly important around RT's commitment to sustainability. Right, and the need to reduce emissions through the life cycle of the mine. Of course, we don't want the minerals and metals powering our energy transition to be mined unsustainably. And it's great to hear that you're really thinking seriously about that issues and looking beyond the company itself for those answers. I'd like to pivot a little bit and ask you, one of the things that we're seeing across the board in these minerals and metals markets is a lack of supply chain capacity. We simply need to bring more of this stuff to market in order to reach our goals. From your seat as the largest metals and mining company in the world, where do you see the next key steps needing to be taken in order to improve that capacity? Are we talking policy levers, policy intervention, or just a need for financial markets to engage more effectively in this space in order to get more capital into the ground?
Yeah. No, first of all, just to what you referred to, we feel both the burden and the responsibility and the possibility, quite frankly. We have a big carbon footprint, and per definition, mining is not sustainable, but the world needs these metals and minerals, and therefore it's a matter of doing it in the most sustainable way possible, plus contributing to the circular economy. And the other thing is, ultimately, yes, we're a private company, but mining, in a way, is societal choices. You really need to be sure of both that your community, but also that society at large are going in for it. And that brings in what you just said about, are regulators ready for this? It is very difficult to go through the energy transition, particularly in a free market economy where there is not a value set on carbon. And we probably need some kind of value penalty or cost on carbon that would help the normal market economy to work. But the regulator can play a very active role as well. And you're absolutely right to say that there are certain critical minerals we simply need more of. Otherwise, the energy transition cannot happen. And in that regard, it is sometimes challenging that approval of a new mine can take 10 years. And then, of course, it takes another 5 years to get it up and running. So that's where regulators, and we work with regulators, could help just to when something is needed, how can we make this in the right way, but just a little bit faster.
You said the magic word in all of these energy transition conversations, which is, when do we begin to place a value on that carbon emission? It's fascinating to see those conversations actually begin to take hold in the mining industry as well as every other part of the energy transition. When you speak about the regulatory piece and the need to engage regulators effectively, I think it's an interesting dovetail on how policymakers are engaging in this space. And as it currently stands, that's a largely geopolitical question, it seems. There's a lot of concern about concentration throughout the mineral supply chain, all the way from the upstream down through midstream processing. You're a global company. You have a footprint in every single part of the supply chain around the world nearly. How do you grapple with those geopolitical concerns possibly shaping the dialogue around these mineral supply chains?
There's no doubt that we have seen an increasing and very unpredictable increase in geopolitical tension, not least with what nobody had seen coming at the beginning of the year, a war between Russia and Ukraine. Look, the way I look at it is that it's not up to us for the what. It's for the US government to figure out how much are they comfortable about importing versus producing themselves. But when they make up their policy choices, we are part of the solution. We can help with how can you then achieve what your policy goals are. And right now, the US government have set some very ambitious target to decarbonize the economy. And that is going to be super, super challenging. And I think we can play a very, very meaningful role there. And what also plays in is how much will the US accept to import and how much will it accept to do within the US. We have a massive footprint here in the US, and we like to revitalize that and actually expand it.
Of course, and that's a huge push across both administrations in the United States that have tried to grapple with these issues of expanding mineral supply chain capacity. And clearly, I think we're going to see some increased policy momentum to localize those pieces of the supply chain, certainly. But I think the most important thing you mentioned is whether it's with your fellow corporations in the energy system, or it's with policymakers, or whether it's with the financial community, it's really about engaging seriously on these issues and giving companies like yours in your industry as a general stakeholder in the energy transition a seat at the table to think about these issues, to advise and support how we can really make sure these healthy supply chains support climate action, which we all agree on fundamentally. And that's kind of, again, bringing us right back to why we're here.
Exactly.
So I might let you wrap us up by saying any big final messages you want to leave our audience with, or generally what your goals are as you spend your week here in New York.
I think the challenge is so big that it will have to go beyond the company. I mean, we all represent various interests and company interests, and it was interesting for me in a roundtable this morning to talk to other big American companies, and in many ways every company has a good story, but we should not forget that we have not cracked the code yet. The world's emission of CO2 went up last year, and it will go up this year, and it will go up the next year. So we really have a daunting challenge, and therefore we need to be ambitious and act with speed.
Well, there you have it. Jakob, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited we're about to head into another series of meetings with you to discuss these issues more in depth. So thank you for joining us, and to the rest of our audience, please stay tuned. We'll be doing more of this work throughout New York Climate Week, both in and outside of the critical minerals and metals space. So thank you again, Jakob.
Thank you.
Pleasure.